Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. Now, so far this year, I've had flights cancelled as events such as Mobile World Congress in Barcelona and more recently, of course, the Adobe Summit in Vegas have all been stopped due to fears around the coronavirus. But what I've noticed is people are forced to think differently at the moment. So when you think about solving conference problems because of the coronavirus, combined with the increasing awareness around sustainability, carbon footprints, especially when you're thinking of getting thousands of people from all over the world into one location and hundreds of flights, people are now naturally starting to think, wait a minute, what about virtual conferences? Now, a company called Matchbox Virtual Media is a startup located in Montreal in Canada, and they're enjoying fantastic success right now. And their business model is obviously being placed right in the spotlight because of the problems with traditional conferences at the moment and the coronavirus. But their success is ultimately down by creating meaningful conversations, but virtually. Now, the company began just over a year ago and help host virtual conferences, and they recently held a virtual event for CPA professionals across the country, which saw 249 attendees taking part in one conversation spread over 2 days and 4 sessions. And there were over 33,000 words exchanged between them and over 980 connections made. I mean, 33,000 words. That is a book, isn't it? But of course, the current situation with the coronavirus has thrown this startup into the spotlight. So I invited their CEO and co-founder, Arianna Rehak, onto the podcast to find out more. So come with me all the way to Montreal so we can speak with Arianna now. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Absolutely. So my name is Arianna Rehak, and I am the CEO and co-founder of Matchbox Virtual Media. And we produce virtual events and virtual conferences that are designed to host large-scale conversations. So most of our conferences are actually sparked by a specific challenge that a industry is facing or a profession is facing. So they're coming together to meaningfully discuss moving forward, basically. And so what we do is in this virtual space, we record speaker panelists having a conversation, and then we broadcast that out with an attendee chat. So it's kind of continuing the conversation. And then all that data, all those conversations taking place, thousands of chat messages, basically, we make meaning of that and capture it into an ebook or resource that we make back available to the community.
Fantastic, incredibly exciting space at the moment. And like you say, before speaking to you today, my understanding was that Matchbox you're located in Montreal in Canada and help create meaningful conversations, but virtually. And that hooks me in straight away. But can you tell me more about how you're using technology to help organizations produce these virtual events that actually foster meaningful conversations?
Absolutely. So interestingly, we are not a technology company. Very often when I talk about what we do, people kind of assume that we're a platform. And for us, we're just using technology in a different way. So we use a series of tools to help us. We've actually been building internal tools to make our processes more efficient. So for example, the video editing process, we have a very specific process around that. So we built a tool. I would say the sexiest tools that we are building in-house are the data tools to interpret the collective knowledge. So we just did a really big event for certified public accountants, and they had, after the event, 33,000 words exchanged in 3 hours.
Wow.
And they have a very big industry or profession-wide challenge they're facing, which is that automation is fundamentally shifting what it means to be a CPA. And so they have a big problem to solve in terms of bringing their members along that thought process. So the associations really wanted to understand where their members are at, if they're embracing change, what they need. So this was a tall order of making meaning of those conversations. So we experimented with some data tools that we built, and basically the exercise, we had a few people on the team. We were comparing human sense making with the data tools. So we basically handed them over, so to speak, and said, okay, how are you using these? Was it easier just to analyze the text yourself, or how did you interact with the tools? So that was a very interesting exercise.
And due to the coronavirus, many tech conferences are being cancelled and replaced with virtual conferences at the moment, and bringing virtual conference into mainstream conversation. So I'm curious, are you noticing a real spike over there?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I feel kind of weird about it, actually, because so we're a year old. And so I think this will forever be part of our story.
Yeah.
It's been interesting responding to it, because a lot of the needs right now in the space are quite different than the services that we're used to providing. If you're coming to us with a large industry problem and we're building an event around that, there's a whole process we have in place around asking the right questions to really get into the conversations. But a lot of these associations that are coming to us right now, they just need their captured presentations in the virtual space. So we've been kind of responding accordingly and trying to create something quickly that is responding to that need.
And you did mention it's going to become a part of your story, but I'd love to take you back to the beginning of that story. So can you tell me the story actually behind Matchbox? Because I believe your first virtual conference was actually just an experiment, wasn't it?
Oh, yes, it was. Pretty much everything that I've ever done in life started that way. So I used to run an organization called associationsuccess.org. And so they are a digital publication and online community for leaders of associations. And so when I started, it was day one, basically. So 0 community members, 0 people, 0 readers. And so it was my challenge to grow this community, essentially. And so the first virtual conference was held for that community. And really the evolution of thought that led to the concept of our virtual conferences came out of virtual meetings that were group of, there was a big eureka moment for me along that journey. It was a virtual meeting with 10 people on video. And it was essentially a mastermind. So they were coming with their challenges, and the group was collectively workshopping solutions. And I was listening back to a recording of one of these, and I pulled open a Word document, and I started writing problems identified, solutions identified. And what I realized is that the group was so much more effective at the solutions part because they were working together. So you had people of very different backgrounds and perspectives, kind of building off of each other and positively challenging each other in that space in a safe environment to do so. And then that evolution of thought, I took it from there. It just became this obsession with collective knowledge. And so then the question became, how do you meaningfully scale that?
I love those moments of serendipity and how they can create, such great things. And I love your journey and how you've gone from there to creating a virtual event for CPA professionals across the country, which I believe saw 249 attendees taking part in conversations spread over 2 days and 4 sessions. But the CPA virtual event was just one of your most successful events. And you aren't only in the CPA industry, but also helping organizations from all professional streams host those virtual conferences. So can you tell me more about the kind of successful virtual events that you're helping to bring to life for businesses?
Yeah, absolutely. So my big question, so I guess I didn't quite finish the thought about the journey, because we had this successful event for this association success community, and actually really responding to market demand is when we broke off and started Matchbox, because the attendees of that virtual conference were potential producers of virtual conferences themselves, because they were associations. And so in this first year, the associations that we have worked with were previous attendees. So one example, we just did an event, been quite successful, is called Psych Summit. So this is with psychiatrists, and they really grasped the meaning of having a conversation that matters. That's we use that expression all the time. It's actually in our tagline, is if you're going to bring together hundreds of people in the virtual space, you have to bring them together around things that matter. Otherwise, you don't get that engagement in the chat. It's not compelling, and you're also, what's the point? Not moving things forward. So their sessions, kind of depressing actually when I say them all at once, but one of their sessions was about climate change actually. And so that was probably one of the most powerful sessions I've ever seen, because the speakers were so passionate about the topic. Like they were all up. So we record through webcam. They were all up in the webcam. It was as if, one of them in particular, as if she was ready to jump through the camera and shake you and say, pay attention to this. And the chat conversations, I mean, this was the first kind of cause-based session we had held, and it was extremely galvanizing. I mean, people in the chat were sharing resources and ideas and articles and saying, hey, you should, this council is having this meeting at this time, you should come check it out. And so, our events, they're the starting point. People are identifying in the chat their people. They're identifying the ones that they want to keep interacting with. And so we've heard amazing stories of people that got hired through our virtual conferences who, there's a session coming up soon at an in-person conference, if it doesn't get canceled, I suppose. But the three are speakers in a session who met in our virtual conference. And so I know it's a very counter narrative to what people think of when they think of virtual events, but it is actually a really powerful way of networking.
Fantastic. And we've already mentioned how the coronavirus is bringing virtual conferences into the mainstream. But I think if we combine that with sustainability and the growing awareness around that, and people starting to question the carbon footprint of thousands of attendees traveling from all over the world, do you think that's going to help virtual conferences thrive too, with that greater awareness about our own personal responsibilities around sustainability?
Absolutely. I mean, we've had the climate change session in particular. One of the speakers said she was so relieved to see it was a virtual conference because she refuses to travel. Wow. It's an interesting thing. I've been struggling with the message around it being environmentally friendly because so there was a study done once. So a group of people were given a protein bar. And they were told, this bar is healthy. And then there was another group that was given the same bar and told, this bar is delicious. And the group that was told that it was delicious reported themselves to be fuller and enjoyed the protein bar more. So I've been struggling actually with the message of these being, you should do virtual conferencing because it's environmentally friendly. You should also do them because it has so many other amazing benefits, and you can take advantage of virtual tools and experiences, and you're going to get a different experience than the in-person, but it's just as valuable on its own. So yeah, that's been a marketing message I haven't pushed too hard, but it's super true. I mean, if you take one conference and put it in the virtual space, that's potentially 1,000 flights, and all of the waste that happens just gone. And that's a big deal.
And of course, there are so many other aspects that go with live events, such as event marketing, content creation, community management. So can you tell me more about how you're using tech to make that a little bit easier as well for people?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are, on the marketing side, there are so many digital marketing tools that you can bring to bear. One of the ones that we have found the most powerful, it's called Snowball, Snoball. And the way it works, it's basically capitalizing on influencer marketing or micro influencer marketing, where the technology, it creates special landing pages for the speakers of your conference, but also the attendees of your conference. And so if I'm an attendee, I have registered for the conference, maybe a week before I receive an email that's enticing me to share the event. And the link that it gives me to share the event is a personalized landing page. So it would have my name, and I can now share it with my network. Now, what's kind of compelling about our events in terms of the marketing message is that the message isn't share this event because it's going to be a great event. The message is share this event because it's about capturing collective knowledge. So invite the people that you really respect and that you think are going to add value to the greater whole.
Looking towards the future, what excites you about emerging technologies? We're seeing all the buzzwords at the moment, but what excites you about them, and how do you think they will actually help Matchbox continue to evolve as we move forward?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say certainly on the side of analyzing making meaning of the collective knowledge. I just heard a speaker recently, and he's very interested in collective intelligence. And so, but the type of collective intelligence he's interested in is a convergence. So he had a TED Talk, for instance, where he brought an ox onto the stage, and the entire audience, everyone guessed the weight of that ox. And so they found the average of that and compared it to the actual weight of the ox. And it was like, just I think 30 pounds off or something like that. And oxes are pretty big. So that's a pretty impressive margin of error. So our interest is not in convergence of collective intelligence. It's understanding the divergence. It's understanding where people are differing in their ideas and how those ideas can help, how that diversity of perspective can help move things forward. So that's a much harder task. So as AI gets better and better at understanding context and understanding sentiment, that's going to be something that's going to be really useful for us.
Fantastic. And for anybody listening to our conversation today and just want to find out more information about the great work you're doing there at Matchbox and see how it could benefit them and how you can deliver value to them, what's the best way of finding you online and equally contacting your team if they do have any additional questions?
Yeah, so absolutely finding me on LinkedIn. I'm assuming show notes will have the spelling of my name. I think I have a defunct Twitter account. That is really, really, really not the way to reach me. Otherwise, our website, matchboxvirtual.com, also responsive to that.
Excellent. Well, I'll add those links to the show notes just so people can find you nice and easily. And one of the main things I've loved about our conversation today is I think that although it's not the ideal circumstances with what's happening with the coronavirus, I do think that combined with sustainability, people are just starting to think a little bit different. I think it's going to be incredibly exciting times ahead for you guys in the future. So I'd love to stay in touch with you, get you back on later in the year and see how things are progressing. But more than anything, just a big thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
It was a real pleasure to speak with Arianna today. And although she probably wishes it was under better circumstances, I think the spreading of the coronavirus is going to play a big part in their story at Matchbox. And I think it is that virus combined with awareness around our responsibilities with sustainability and reducing carbon footprints that is forcing people to think differently and encourage them to try new things and experiment with virtual conferences. Maybe they wouldn't have thought about it before. Maybe they would have thought it was too difficult or just a little bit unsure about it. But now they're reaching out and experimenting. But I would love to hear your thoughts on everything that we've talked about today. So please email me directly, techblogwriter@outlook.com, tweet me at Neil C. Hughes. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on traditional conferences, virtual conferences, and how there is a place on the digital landscape for both, because I do think both are important and they can complement each other, especially in a world where even if you're at a physical conference, it's getting that word outside of the four walls. That is where the value is as well. It's not just about the 6,000-7,000 people inside the event. It's about getting that message out there. But hey, I'm rambling and thinking out loud. So let me know your thoughts. Remember, you can always pop by my website, techblogwriter.co.uk, and you'll find over 1,100 podcast interviews there too. So I'm quite curious what you're going to all come back with after listening to today's podcast and any experiences or insights you've got to share. But it's time for me to go already. So a big thank you for listening. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.